Hey everybody, how are you? My story is totally different than the previous amazing people that you heard, so hopefully you can give me a little 15 minutes and we'll go from there. When everybody hears Annie Nelson, then they hear a founder of the American Soldier Network. They automatically think that I had a relationship with, or I have a family member serving, or I was involved in the military or something like that, and it could not be more far from the truth. And when I was a kid, I'm an only child born in Minnesota, so any Minnesota folks out here, go Vikings. I know the Broncos are the front row, but my family was always very patriotic. My mom had two brothers who served, but they were in the Korean conflict and never spoke about their service. They were both in the Army, my uncles. One played football and one was a cook, and so I never really knew much about their service. My grandfather, who was from Norway, born in Norway and served for the U.S. Army on the beaches of Normandy, actually, was deceased before I was born, so I didn't know my grandpa either. My dad, believe it or not, was drafted, but my dad was 6'9" and was too tall to serve, so he wasn't ever able to serve. So growing up in a patriotic family and still not having the connection to anyone in your community was a little bit of a stretch for me when I actually made this transition back in 2004. But I remember after living through a lot of different things, I was always involved in philanthropy. My mom was always in it, my dad was always in it, and so I was always growing up through a philanthropic home. Never in a million years did I have a desire or think that I would start a nonprofit. That just wasn't in me. And as he said, I was a flight attendant in the 90s. I flew and on December 30th of 1994. Of course, that was close to New Year's Eve. We had a little incident on a plane, and I was beat up by passengers and they broke my back. That turned into a year of new discovery and new learning and new healing, and it also turned into what I learned about invisible wounds. Back then it was called post-traumatic stress syndrome, and I knew, even though I'm a blonde, I was an educated blonde, that I didn't have a syndrome. There was nothing, I wasn't born with it, it just happened and there was stuff going on. So through that journey, I became speaking and advocating to get rid of the S. It was just PTS. It happens to civilians, it happens to military families, it happens to a lot of people, and most people don't recognize it, nor do they do anything about it. We got rid of the S, and now we got stuck with the D. So we're trying to get rid of the D, but honestly, they only use those terms for insurance purposes and diagnoses purposes. It's not a disorder, it's not a life sentence. It happens, and you need to learn how to recognize it, you need to learn how to find your ways out of it, and you need to know that it is not a life sentence. So going through the 90s and into 2000, that was pretty much my journey. I was doing event planning, I was speaking for the PTS stuff, I was still working on my own healing and trying to do it the smart way and not the easy way, but a lot of times when you find your ways and it's a very individual way, you have to choose your path and you have to stick to it and you have to put the work in. Nothing in life that's good is gonna happen without the work that it takes to make it happen. So then I had a little nonprofit that I started, but it was not a nonprofit to make money, it was to give time, and we were called Angels Within. And what we initially did was we gave time to children in hospitals that were suffering because their mom and dad were there, or it's a long-term illness when you have a kid in the hospital, and a lot of times they don't get a break. So my friends and I had Angels Within, and we would just go give time. We would give it at children's hospitals, we would give mom and dad a break, we would play with the kids, we would read, and we would also go to senior citizens' homes and visit the seniors that have been put there and not visited by their families, because those were two of my passions at the time. Fast forward, 9/11 happens. And I wanted to do something for the veteran and military community, but I didn't know how, and I didn't even have the clue on how to get started. But I remembered my grandpa had written a postcard to my grandma from when he was serving on the beaches of Normandy, and I thought, I could pen pal. I could do that. I was at a family reunion back in Illinois, and one of my cousins that's, gosh, probably fourth or fifth down the line, was dating a young Marine that was getting ready to deploy. I am in California, right by Camp Pendleton, and ironically, he was in Camp Pendleton. So I got he and two of his buddies, and they became my first three pen pals. We would write, and this is 2004, we would write back and forth as we could, because back then we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have Instant Messenger, we didn't have Snapchat, none of that. We had AOL Instant Messenger, and we had a pen and paper. And so I would learn how to set my alarm to Iraq time when they were deployed, and when they were at a FOB and could get on AOL Instant Messenger, we would communicate that way. If they couldn't, it was the good old-fashioned pen and paper. And this became like fascinating to all my friends and family because they saw the journey and the connection that I had with these three young Marines. Then it became packages, and the packages became bigger, and my friends, my family, my church, everybody wanted to chip in and start sending stuff, and they called them my three. So this kept going on, and they were my extracurricular activity, and I don't have any children, so I used to call them my boys, and the story went on, and then in December of 2004, December 22nd to be specific, two of them, Jesse and Tyler, were sitting in a caravan of 5 trucks going through Iraq, and they were hit by a suicide bomber. Now, I was under the impression, and through miscommunications, I was told that they were hit, but I didn't know how to deal with that. And so I tried to reach out some more and find out more. I knew that Tyler was in Germany in really bad shape, and I was told Jesse didn't make it. So now my whole extracurricular activity and energy had been focused on these guys, and I didn't know how to lose someone because I've never met him in person. It was only letters, but to me it was a big deal, and I didn't know really how to process that. And if you go to the Hallmark store and you try to find a sympathy card for somebody that you've never met to be able to send it to his parents, there's nothing there. So what I decided to do to help me and what I thought would be good for him was I would box up all my letters and everything that I had from him, and I would send his parents a thank you letter. Thank you for their service, thank you for their family service, and show them what a great young man they had and what the friendship we developed over the old-fashioned pen pal way. Never did I mention anything about what I had learned. I didn't want to go down a negative path because they'd never met me, and that was, to me, too intrusive. So then we kept going, and we had Christmas in 2004, and I'd never heard anything back, and kept focusing on Ty, who was in Germany, and sending him what I could. And then about 2 weeks into 2005, my cell phone rings. And it's a woman's voice, and she says, "Annie, this is Jesse's mom." And as you can tell, I'm just so shy, introverted, and quiet. I got really excited, and I went from 0 to 60 really quick, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, hi, how are you?" And I'm rattling, and she said, "I'm at Brooke Army Medical Center. Jesse survived that blast. He's facing double amputation, he's burnt over 80% of his body, and he's asking for his pen pal, will you come?" Now, exhale. I've never been in a military hospital. I've never been in a VA. So it was like, holy smokes. Next thing I know, a support group from the Marine Corps is flying me to Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas. I remember going down the escalator in that elevator like it was yesterday. My first interaction was there's an Army guy in combat clothes waiting for me with little name, and I'm on my way to Brooke. Stayed at the Fisher House. So for any of you that have never been there, Brooke Army Medical Center is an amazing facility in San Antonio. And the Fisher House was smaller then, but like when I was there, Denzel came in, did his big hoopla, and built another big house, and he's the amazing, amazing human being. And I met and walked into a life that I had no clue about. I am meeting men and women who serve that I had never interacted with. And back in 2004, and this was 2005 now, most of you know, back then we weren't bringing a lot of injured women home because we didn't have a lot of women on the front side, downrange. It was men. So predominantly my first experience and my first immersion, I guess you would say, was with men that were wounded. And when I met these men, young men, pretty much all of them were young, 25 and under, it was an experience that transformed me. And I knew when I got there that it was going to be emotional because it was going to be graphic and it was going to be things that I didn't understand. And back then, Brooke was an Army facility, which it still is. But they didn't have representation in force from the other branches. And now I'm there with the Marine Corps family. So there were things that were happening not to anyone's ill will, but paperwork was falling through the cracks. And so here's me, outsider, knowing nothing about protocol, not a family member, and I was getting irritated that some things were happening to my Marine friends, and so I would kind of get kind of loud and nice, but kind of forceful, and they named me the Bullhorn for the Brave, because I started to see things as an outsider looking in that were falling through the cracks. And so that's where the journey started. And when Jesse and I were down there, little side note today, he is a single-leg amputee. He's amazing. He's married with 3 children, living in Illinois and living the life. So that's a happy note. Jesse and I would go visit other Marines, because y'all kind of stick to your own. And we would bust into rooms. Like, they don't knock. They just, like, bust on in. So I'd be right behind his wheelchair, and we'd bust into some guy's room, like, "Hi, how you doing?" And he, knowing me from California, and knowing I'm from Minnesota, but California was then, and still is, that I had an attachment to the entertainment industry, he'd go in there and be like, "Dude, she's from Hollywood." I'd be like, "Oh, no, South." He'd be like, "Dude, she knows so-and-so, or she did this." And I'm like, no, I'm a nobody in that industry. I've been blessed to have very many friends in that industry and do little bit parts that you may have seen or not seen. But to these guys, I was, quote unquote, Hollywood. And at Brooke at the time, being that we didn't have laptops and we didn't have the advancements that we have in technology today, they would grab their remote control and they would look at me and say, "Does America support us?" Because I was that link, and all they had laying in their hospital bed was the TV set. So after several visits to Brooke, going back and forth and kind of learning, and people were like falling in my lap unbeknownst to me. I recently, would meet Navy SEALs, I would meet Marines, I would meet Army, I would meet Airmen, I would meet Coast Guard. I was being asked to go talk to this person, asked to go talk to that person. It was overwhelming, but it was one of those things where you couldn't say no. And I didn't realize, stepping back, that this was kind of the force that was going to now be pushing my life, and that my PTS back in the 90s was going to help me relate and help others get through their PTS. And then we had a situation where I came home and I started thinking about Angels Within, that little dormant nonprofit that I always wanted to start. And I went to my attorney, who is also the president, and I said, I know what we're going to do. We're going to refile, we're going to change Angels Within, we're going to make it American Soldier Network, and we're going to do things that honor, celebrate, and appreciate all of our veterans of all eras. And we're going to do that by trying to create shows of content that you see on TV that honor, celebrate, and support our military and not tear them down, and that tell real, true, cool American hero stories. And he's nodding, and he's looking at me, and he's smiling, and he's like, honey, that's a great idea, and I will do whatever you need me to do, but you're never going to make it. He said, they are going to paint you a certain color. Hollywood is not going to embrace you. Nobody wants to hear it, and it's going to be the hardest hill you've ever had to climb. And little me, Pollyanna, I said, but with the faith of a mustard seed, you can move a mountain, and I'm going to tell that mountain to move. The mountain's slowly moving. I'm still moving it, but that's how American Soldier Network was started. And when it was started, it was just meant to be an uplift, a lift organization, one where we would spread gratitude, we would raise awareness, we would go onto bases, we would go to VAs, we would do things to help boost morale, thank you, pay gratitude to you, appreciate you and your families, because through my experience at Brooke, I saw how powerfully families serve just as much as each and every one of you. And that's a nugget that's left out of the military appreciation in our country. And I kept seeing that we needed to do more. And I learned that, back during the old wars, in World War I, World War II, even Korea, most people on the country had a connection with someone serving. They had that special relationship. It was either a family member or it was a friend of a family member. Nowadays, it's not there. And nowadays, I find that such a tragedy, because you that serve and that volunteer to the best organization on the planet, that's something to be insanely proud of, and that's something that no other person on the world can say they did, no matter what your rank is. I don't care if you just got in or if you're a general. You represent the best of what America, which is the best country on the planet, has to offer. And I don't think half of the country appreciates it properly or recognizes it. But they're getting a little bit better, slowly but surely. But there are those of us that do get it. Now, are those of us that changed our life and decided this was the path we were going to go on? No. I mean, like I said, I never in a million years would have gone to college, pursued broadcasting, pursued all the other things I pursued to find out that here's where I'm going to be and to be speaking with all of you. I would rather sit and listen to all of you and your stories, because I am inspired and I get so much from each and every one of you. And then when I'm going through 2010, I had my massive brain tumor. That 6.5 centimeters, when I woke up, I looked like I had a stroke. I'd lost my face, I lost my voice, I had no eye, I couldn't speak, I had a straw hanging out of my mouth, and I was huge, because the meds they give you make you gain a ton of weight. So when I looked at the doctor, I said, I did not sign up to be a half-winking, half-smiling sumo wrestler. This is not me. My granny pants don't even fit. So those are the things that I kept having to go through, and then I kept thinking, these are just equipping my toolbox to identify and help more of our heroes. Because what I went through as a civilian, I know about invisible wounds. People look at me when I walk in a room and they have no idea that I have pain all the time from my back injury. I'm deaf in my right ear. My right eye doesn't work that well. If I get really tired, my voice will drop. So there's all these things that all of us go through. But you know what? It's all about resilience, like resiliency. It's the ability to get back up. And we're all dealt a different deck. Every single seat in here has something that you're going through, whether you admit it or not, to the extent it is, or to the intensity that it's in your life. But stay mission-focused and create your own personal mission and live outside whatever you think you're going through. Yes, you're in the Air Force. Yes, you're in the military. That's a part of you. But what's the part of you that really makes you tick and really ignites you and really is going to get you on fire for something, to do something more and leave your legacy while you're here on the planet? Because everyone in this room has the ability to leave a legacy. You just need to find it. Thank you.